what is the fear that you're not willing to live with any longer? Because here's the thing, as you sit in the pain, the discomfort, the dissatisfaction, the lack of whatever, there is the fear of making that change. But what is the fear that you're not going to hang out with any longer? So consider the phrase I shared a minute ago, which is, that clarity equals velocity. So for example, when you're in relationship with a significant other or a partner, a close member of your team, for example, ask yourself, are you aligned in your values? How far apart are you in terms of your vision? What are you standing for? What are you tolerating? Certainly over the years within the real estate investment network and within our own business coaching and that personal development coaching that we do, we often come across scenarios where couples, where one person is simply not aligned with the other. And the problem with that is that it's not that they don't make it work. It just creates a lot of different challenges, and not the least of which, it just creates friction and a lot of uncertainty, especially if, or maybe even because, there's finances involved. There are commitments that are involved, timelines that have to be met, just to name a couple of the issues. So drama goes up, stress goes up, anxiety goes up. So again, I'm going to continue to invite you to consider that when you're looking at growing and going forward into a vision, it really is critical to ask a simple but really powerful question. Now, this question is one that Steffany has asked of many audiences from the stage over the years, including the RAIN community. Now, in this particular exercise, she's often doing a completion exercise at the end of a year or at the end of a term. And as part of that completion exercise, she asked the question, what are you so done with? And that you actually absolutely refuse to carry forward into the new year. For example, and I'm going to define, and we have to define what you will carry forward, but here's what I'm so done with. So in other words, what am I so done with? What I will carry forward and what I'm done with. And we know that intellectually, at least, that clarity equals velocity, and that makes total sense, doesn't it? And as a matter of fact, I often say that we need to begin with the end in mind and actually work backwards from that end in mind. We need to have clarity in the outcome we want to achieve, the goal, the vision. But what if we add a layer of work to that thought process? Because the reality is that you may not even know what you really want. We often see that, we often hear that, is that people are unclear what it is they want. It may be that you just simply don't know, but you want something in life to change, to be different, because you don't have, or you're looking to have more joy, more happiness, confidence, a bigger and better business or career, a more fulfilling relationship, or even a relationship, better finances, better ability to earn more money. There's so many things. So we have to stop and ask, what is stopping you? What is stopping any of us? And so the bigger question isn't, no, let me rephrase that. It is the bigger question, isn't it? But for this conversation, let's just start with asking and answering one fundamental question, which is, what are you so done with? And back to the beginning, what pain and discomfort are you no longer willing to tolerate? There's a saying that I use, which is, it's not the weight we carry that breaks us down, it's the way we carry the weight. So when we ask ourselves the question of what are we so done with, think about the weight we want to shed, the weight that is holding us back or actually breaking us down. Let me give you some examples. There's the fundamental we talked about, which is the fear of failure, and so many people are held back by the fear of failure. That's what they say anyways. And when we get to the actual truth of what that really is, it's often the concern or worry about how their actions will be perceived by others, their peers. Their own fear of embarrassment or shame, and that the story they tell themselves of how that will impact their lives. The fear of shame and embarrassment is actually what prevents many from taking risks or trying new things that could lead to the success that they see for themselves, but they actually lack the courage or the conviction or actually the tools to face that fear, to really lean into it. And Another one I often see is the lack of self-alignment. We see people often struggle with aligning their actions with their true values. They're not even clear what their values are, and they're not aligned with their belief system because they actually don't take the time to even examine what their values and beliefs are. And then you see that misalignment. They have that sense of being out of integrity, and it almost always leads to a sense of dissatisfaction and a feeling of living a life that's not genuine or not fulfilling. Okay, next on my list of stuff is relationships, and that is the misalignment in relationship, in partnerships, especially in business or investments. Misalignment between partners can create really significant friction. And that misalignment can be in terms of goals, of values, or approaches to finances and how you operate, commitments, timelines, or views of risk. And that misalignment is really sticky. Again, go back to, clarity equals velocity. And the clearer we are, the better we can do. A big one that shows up often is financial stress. Facing financial challenges or the fear of financial instability can really be a major source of pain or at least significant discomfort. And that might include concerns about making enough money, managing investments wisely, or preparing for future needs. And it's often a big weight. It's stressful if you don't have money, but it's equally as stressful if you do have money. Now, an interesting part of pain that we want to move away from and what we may be so done with is our own stagnation, the feeling of stagnation, and the realization that we're being complacent. The discomfort of feeling stuck or complacent in our current situation, whether it's actually personal or professional growth or our career, our relationships, it can really drive us to change if we can actually see it and then tell the truth about it. Now, this might manifest as a lack of progress or a feeling of being trapped in the status quo, a sense of knowing that you are capable of so much more, but are feeling stuck. You're uncertain, you're unclear. And I can tell you from my own experience, all of what I'm talking about, I've been through, I'm sometimes going through, and it never really, I think, stops. But the feeling of being stuck, the feeling of not being all you can be, that for me is really uncomfortable and sometimes painful because I'm feeling that, what am I missing here? And so there's what we call the gap between knowledge and action. People often consume a lot of educational content, books and podcasts and videos, but then they struggle to implement what they learn. That's why I go back to that question I asked you earlier. Yeah, the discomfort arises from recognizing at some point that this gap between knowledge and action, and this is really common mental game, is that we're actually in motion, but it disguises itself as action. We're reading, we're going to conferences, we're attending free webinars, we're doing things, and in the language I'm using, it motion disguises itself as being in action. So sometimes we have to ask ourselves, am I being in motion right now, or am I being in action? And sometimes you have to be in motion through that learning, getting, sharpening the saw, if you will, before you cut wood. And that's okay. But don't fool yourself into thinking you're in action when in fact you are in motion. The reminder I'm often drawn to is from the meme that if more knowledge was the answer, we'd all be billionaires with six packs. The truth is that it's not the knowledge that moves us forward. It's actually the action we take. So keep that one in mind. There's another one that will often motivate us, inspire us, or it can shut us down. But what the pain we want to move away from often is the social pressure and the expectations of peers. The pressure to conform to, and I mean that in a kind of a backwards negative way. We have this pressure to conform to whatever societal morals or familial expectations. And that can really be a significant source of discomfort if we don't align with that, if we don't agree. So this can involve career choices and lifestyle decisions, or even the way we choose to think and behave. And at some point, we may start to question our belief systems and discover that the pain of staying stuck in that narrative, in that story, and staying stuck under the weight of the peer pressure is not worth not living into the real vision you have for your life. And then to add to all of these examples is a couple more, one of which is the internal conflicts that we have, such as self-doubt, self-deprecation, minimizing ourselves, the negative self-talk that actually sports it can and it actually generally will create a significant barrier to our growth. If you keep telling yourself you're not tall enough, strong enough, big enough, you're not smart enough, you're a loser, you're a moron. And listen, these are all calls and conversations I've had with people, and the self-talk is what shows up. And if we can't bust through that, if we can't bring our awareness to it and start to nip it in the bud, it will show up as a real lack of confidence in our own abilities. It'll show up as a lack of confidence in the decisions, which will then show up as actual excuses, such as being a perfectionist, analysis paralysis, not enough information, or whatever other excuse we might come up with. The thing about all of this is that at some level, we realize we are living a life of unfulfilled potential. That's the realization we have. We have a sense of being able to be greater, and we just don't seem to get there. We, at some point, have the realization that we are not living up to that potential of what we are capable of. And that can really and often work as a powerful motivator or even inspiration for change. But first, we have to bring our attention to it. So whether it's looking at some unexplored, perhaps talent we think we may have, or some unused or even underused skills, or maybe even ultimately doing what we truly love to do. All of this is what leads us to the feeling that if we don't have it, we're going through this lack of joy, and that having that life satisfaction instead, having that life satisfaction. And what happens instead is that we normalize our general sense of unhappiness. We actually go, I'm unhappy, but this is normal. Or we have that dissatisfaction with our life and we don't know what's driving it. So whether it's in our personal achievements, our relationships, or the things we do on a daily basis, are we inspired? Are we having fun? Are we feeling joy? Are we being a contribution? Now, I guess the good news is when we start to recognize and define the pain we want to move away from and what we are so done with, we can actually use it to drive the change we want to be and ultimately experience in our world, which is actually the only world that matters, is our world. So think about it. As much as we have a vision, a set of goals, let's take the time to consider, what is the pain we need to move away from? What is the weight we are no longer willing to carry? Which is just another way of saying, what are we so done with? Consider whether it's your BS or your belief system, the values you are no longer willing to compromise, the quality of the relationships that you believe you deserve, the levels of communication. We have to look at the pain that we're no longer willing to live with. That when we then see that vision we have, it doesn't include that. It's what moves us away and moves us forward. Now, as with any journey of self-discovery and growth, it has to begin with being self-aware, questioning the thoughts that we have, and of bringing the unconscious into the conscious, being aware of our thoughts, being easier on ourselves, being more gentle with ourselves.